And she talked about social and emotional learning as the foundation of subsequent education, and I think that's just so important. And adult socio-emotional literacy, and I think that's important not just for teachers, but for parents, community members. Derek Murchison, really, when he spoke about creating a loving, supportive environment for students and for teachers, that really stuck out to me. I mean, when you're talking about how to retain students in an environment that's not supportive and is hostile and is judgmental and critical. And he talked about having students worried about deportation, poverty, hunger, homelessness, violence. You know, it's pretty overwhelming. Paul Gotthold, one of the things that jumped out for me, and I think this is important as we move forward, he said that the college is the target. There isn't a job out there that doesn't require some form of post-secondary education. And I think that this is, you know, that thing, you know, when you want to hit hard, you punch past the target. And the target isn't graduation, it is post-secondary education at this point. And I think that's important. I'll be brief, I know I'm out very much out of time. Kyle actually gave me some downer stuff in there, but it gave me a lot of hope. And one of the things in particular is when he talked about his community schools micro-credentialing. And I would encourage trustees and principals and educators to talk to Kyle after this and to get more information about how to enroll in that, because I think it'd be amazing to start implementing that program. And again, I always go back to this, but one of the elements of that program is stakeholder community boards. And you know, I think a vision that we talk about a lot in Educate for the Future, and if for a moment could the members of Educate for the Future stand up, because they've really been fundamental to this whole process. Thank you. One of the things we talk about a lot is, or one of the things we're oftentimes envisioning is what does it look like when a school is really the center of community life? That's not just educating your kids, but is educating future employees and the person that's going to help you get a home loan and the person you're going to walk by on the street and greet. And the schools are going to be hosting your Little League games, and you're going to have Cinco de Mayo festivities at your school. And I think that to me is really, it's not just a beautiful vision of what education could be, but it's achievable. And Kyle, the program laid out by Kyle, I think helps us to achieve that. Rebecca, right now, I think one of the things that right off the bat stood out is when she said one of the resources they had was anger. And one of the things I talk about when doing political organizing in general is you can't make waves. Waves are too, I mean, as a coastal person, a wave is too big to make it. You have to scan the horizon and prepare for that wave. And I think one of the things that came out in Rebecca's discussion is the pent-up demand that she was able to tap into. You can imagine, I don't think you could make a wave, but at the very least it would take you decades to actually make the wave. But when you're facing that level of pent-up demand, and I think that pent-up demand is all over our society, it's pervasive. And on the negative side, that's what Trump tapped into. I mean, he's a moron, but he tapped into this pent-up demand for the product he was selling. So I think we need to pay a lot of attention. We need to own our anger as an element, an organizing element, and to pay attention to the balance of forces and identify that pent-up demand and exploit it. And I love this idea that risk led into many risks. And the idea of starting with very small commitments and escalating is like, that's beautiful. Letitia, again, one of the things that Letitia emphasized repeatedly was collaboration and partnerships. And I think, you know, one of the things I noticed very early on is there were people who were always trying to develop their own agendas, and there were people who were going around and figuring out and helping other people's agendas. And I think it's productive if we start doing a lot more figuring out what other people's agendas are and how we can support them rather than just sort of developing our own new agenda. And she talked about predictive dialers and one-on-one connection. So this takes time, man. Organizing takes time. You know, you have an event like this, you get 100 something people to turn out. It takes hundreds and hundreds of hours. So I think, and it may have been Daniel, or maybe it was Chris, who said this can't just be labor unions. Like, we can't just, because honestly, labor unions are under assault, and we can't, you know, increasingly we can't rely on them because they're losing members to Janus. So it's going to have to be us, community members, you know, allies. Daniel Barnard, wow, that was a great talk. We're going to have to help out on the strike, man. That's totally crazy. So, Dan also talked about the importance of the context of housing and poverty, and he also said something. He also said that they're building the power to make sure they are able to implement this. And there was a note of threat, and I want to tap into it. I often talk about politics as pleasure and pain, and you know, usually I think a lot of us like to work with pleasure. You like to make it pleasurable and beneficial for elected officials to do the right thing. But we ultimately have to build the capacity to deliver pain. And you don't want to spend all day doing it because then everyone hates you. But when push comes to shove, if they think that they can shove you off and ignore you, you're going to have to spend the years and the thousands of hours building community grassroots power to deliver pain. And I'm happy to help Daniel deliver his pain. In closing, the next 2 years, in many ways, will determine the future of public education in California. We are in that phase right now. And this year we witnessed an all-out effort by charter proponents and their billionaire backers to seize control of the state capitol. The charter industry's independent expenditure on the Via Ragosa campaign topped $22 million, then the largest in California history. They broke that record again 5 months later, pouring $30 million into an independent expenditure for Marshall Tuck. If history is any guide, they will pour as much and more into races in 2020. We will need to be phone bankers, canvassers, fundraisers, donors, and candidates in order to stem this corrupt tide at the ballot box. We will need to relentlessly lobby our elected officials in Sacramento to pass common sense legislation to regulate the charter industry. Fiscal impact on school districts must absolutely be a criterion of consideration for the authorization of charter petitions and renewals. We will put together legislator meetings and lobby days in Sacramento, and we will need your active participation. I've done a lot of lobbying over the last 2 years, particularly on the environment, on housing in Sacramento. It doesn't cost that much, $125 plane ticket. We can probably get some of that covered. It is deeply empowering to sit with your state legislators and argue with them. And San Diego, and honestly, San Diego is so powerful right now in the legislature with Senator Atkins as pro tem and Assemblymember Gonzalez Fletcher as the appropriations chair, that when you go to these statewide organizing groups and you put together a lobby day, everybody wants you on their group because they want somebody who has a relationship or is a constituent of those legislators. So, we'll get you involved with that. Alliance San Diego is the local lead on the statewide Schools and Communities First proposition, which will preserve the residential portion of Prop 13, thank goodness, so we can actually run it in our communities, but eliminate the corporate loopholes that are starving our schools of funding. We will need canvassers and candidates who are willing to campaign heavily on Prop 13 reform. Yes, and now, and let me say this quick. I'm sorry, I know I'm way over, but let me say this. I was on the organizing committee, San Diego Organizing Committee for Prop 10. It's extremely expensive to run against the Apartment Owners Association. It's extremely expensive to run against all the people who will come out of the woodwork on the Schools and Communities First proposition. One of the ways we can reduce the cost of that is to have candidates who are running their own races but will take that risk for us. As I was organizing, I was given the responsibility to try to get San Diego elected officials and candidates to support Prop 10. One elected official, and I have relationships with dozens of them, one elected official agreed to publicly endorse Prop 10, and that was Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher. And one very important candidate also agreed to be on our list of endorsers, and that was our newest city council member, Monica Montgomery. Well, honestly, had we been able to get elected officials and candidates from across the state to run on that issue, it would have dramatically reduced the cost of the actual campaign. So again, I would make this a criteria. This particular proposition, Schools and Communities First proposition, I would make it a criteria of support for candidates. We'll need to exert maximum pressure on Governor Newsom to appoint members to the State Board of Ed that are committed to the long-term health of public education.
But by getting him to spend some of the $9 billion surplus that he's going to inherit on education. He's going to have $9 billion. $12 billion.
Absolutely. This guy's after those surpluses. Amen. We will need to support pro-public candidates in next year's March 5th special election for Los Angeles Unified to replace former charter executive Ref Rodriguez, who pled guilty to conspiracy and resigned earlier this year. And Daniel will tell us who our candidate will be, so we don't have to use our own brain. You got a candidate yet?
We are.
Are you running? Are you running? I'll support you. I'm your first endorsement.
We're deep in the process internally of making a recommendation. It would be inappropriate for me to make any other comment.
Okay. He's running. He's running.
There are 17 candidates, and about 10 of them are educators, and about 2 of them have deep charter connections. So.
Okay. That's great. We're going to split our vote. Closer to home, we will need to support educators at Gompers Preparatory Academy. We just filed a union ad. And we need to lobby the State Board of Education to respect the decision of SDUSD to deny renewal to Thrive Charter School. Our San Diego Public Education Coalition here is committed to helping to strategize and organize the desperate struggle ahead to save public education and to save the public sphere more generally. These summits have been preparation for the battles that lie ahead. The privatizers and their billionaire backers are hoarding hundreds of millions of dollars to dismantle the public education system that is fundamental to our values and our traditions as Americans. If you want to meet the people who will answer the call to defend our institutions, look around. They're sitting next to you. They're sitting in your chair. No one is going to save us but ourselves. And I'm serious about that. And when I'm in this room, I mean all of you. And when I wake up in the middle of the night, I mean myself. No one is going to save us but ourselves. I want to close with a message that's more general. This series of forums emerged out of our collective anxiety about Trump and Secretary DeVos. But we need to recognize that our struggle is not ultimately about Trump. Trump is a manifestation of a deeper problem, which predates Trump and will endure beyond Trump and will continue to produce Trumps until we resolve it. Trump is a manifestation of a global decline in liberal democracy. Bolsonaro in Brazil, Duterte in the Philippines, Modi in India, Erdogan in Turkey, Le Pen in France, Acheson in Sweden, Orban in Hungary, AfD in Germany, UKIP in England. You get the picture, it's everywhere. Across the world, liberal democracy is in decline. There are many reasons, but one stands above all others. Liberal democracy has failed to deliver on the shared prosperity that is its promise. The underfunding of public education, the abandonment of the public sphere, the privatization of public resources, disinvestment in working families and communities of color, climate change and the tragedy of the planetary commons, these are all facets of the same disease. Call it neoliberalism or the third way or late capitalism or austerity. At root, it is the mistaken belief that I can save my children without saving your children, without saving all children. If you're not already there, get to the front lines. The battle's begun. Yeah.